Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Today I'm going to be looking at a beautiful Bachmann steam locomotive, this one for the first time ever. It's not too often that that happens, so I'm really excited for this one. Bachmann's Atlantic locomotives are really good. I like them a lot. I've looked at two of them already, the C1 Atlantic and the H1 Atlantic. Both were absolutely fantastic, and if you want to see one of the videos, I'll pop, let's say, the C1 up there. Really good locos. But there is a third Atlantic produced by Bachmann Branch Line, and it's one that I've not looked at, and it's one that I get requested to look at quite often. So finally I've got one, and here it is. It is the Bachmann H2 Atlantic, which is the slight successor to the H1, so it's a must, isn't it really? Or that's my excuse anyway. So these are very, very expensive. The latest RRP for this version in the Southern Green is £199. So insanely expensive, and I think the latest H2 release from Bachmann, the BR Black one, has an RRP of £220, which is just ridiculous if you ask me. They're probably good locos, but I'm not expecting this to be good enough to justify £200, particularly when you consider that I paid for this 120 quid from the model centre. They had a bit of a sale going and this was available for 120, which if you ask me is much more like it. But maybe I've been unfair there. Maybe this will be way better, be a way higher standard than the C1 and the H1, and maybe it will be worth £200. I highly doubt it, and I stake my reputation on it not being so, but it could be. That's why we do these reviews. So let's get this thing out, let's see what it's like, let's see if it's worth 200 quid, and let's have some fun with it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so Bachmann's third and final Atlantic locomotive, and do you know what? I've been able to get all three without doubling up on any liveries, so I've got three Atlantics in different liveries, which is pretty cool. Speaking of liveries, there are quite a lot of liveries to choose from when it comes to Bachmann's Atlantics and the H2. I mean, the H2, for instance, it used to just be available possibly in the BR Black, I'm not sure. I think it was just one livery to start with, but now you can get it in the LBSC Umber in original condition. Of course, you've got the Southern Green here and the BR Black, of course, so there's at least three you can choose from, so great amount of choice. Let me show you the version I have though. So the product number for this is 31-920. It is the H2 class number 2421 South Foreland, and it is in the Southern Lined Mansell Green, and it has a 21-pin DCC decoder socket inside, so you need a 21-pin decoder if you want to chip this. Alright, let me show you the back of the box then, because there is a bit of history on the back there. So if you want to read it, if you want to learn more about the class, pause and read it if you want to, but I will give you a bit of history in just a second. Alright, so at the very least, if this turns out to be of a similar standard to the C1 and the H1, then this will be a good loco. The mechanisms on those were pretty good, pretty average, but better than most Bachmann locos, and the level of detail was pretty darn good on those as well. So without any further ado, let's get this out and take a look. Oh yes. I must say the Southern Green looks amazing. I think the Umber might still be my favourite, but this loco might have the power to change that. We'll have to wait and see on that. Okay, let's pull this out then. Let's see what the weight is like. Yep, seems pretty weighty. And again, if this is like the C1 and the H1, there will be a fair element of die cast on this loco, which is great. Okay, so we've got the instruction booklet here, which is a high quality one. Bachmann's recent instruction manuals are very, very good. So on the first page we've got a bit about accessories. I did spot an accessories bag, so that's going to have all of this stuff in it. Shows you where all the bits and bobs go. That's great. We'll look at the accessories in a second. Accessories continued. You've got cab doors, loads of other parts there. Lubrication, fairly standard, shows you the lubrication points. Motor bearing lubrication, oh blimey, yeah, that's got one of those strange plugs which connect the loco and tender together, and to disconnect them you have to remove some of the tender axles. Yeah, it's not a good design that. We've seen far, far better designs than Bachmann's when it comes to connecting locos and tenders. Body removal looks like the fairly standard Bachmann motor. probably just going to be a 3-pole job on this, which obviously is ridiculous given the £200 RRP. But we'll check. Maybe it has got a 5-polar. That would be really nice. Lubrication, that's fine. DCC decoder fitting, shows you how to get access there. There we go on the other page, shows you where the chips go. Speaker, if you want to fit it. Nope, for 200 quid, you don't get a speaker fitted to this loco. Yeah, it doesn't seem like great value, but maybe I'll eat my words. A bit more on decoder fitting. So it's thorough. I think we can certainly say that without any doubt. Very thorough, covers all bases. That's very good. Okay, so looks like there's some good features in the accessories bags. So let's pull these out and take a look. Right, what do we have in here then? So we've got more than one accessories bag. Let's have a look in the big one first. So there are some great features in these accessories bags. You've got the cab doors, which are painted. You've got the optional head code discs, and many feel that these models are not complete without those fitted, so that's a must for some, I know. You've got actual proper, what look like metal screw-link couplings, so that's great. You can fit those if you want to, and I suppose if you were careful, you could even use them, because they're not just moulded. They do look like they're made of metal and would actually move. Yeah, all sorts in there. Vacuum fittings, little screws. Wow, all kinds of detail. But it doesn't end there. It's like I'm on a shopping channel or something. You've also got this, which is a set of etched name and number plates. Really high quality feature. So, you know, in a sense, as ridiculous as the price is for a loco like this from Bachmann, I mean, they don't just skank you, do they? They do actually give you one or two quality features such as those. Whether or not the number of quality features is actually enough to justify the price is yet to be seen, but it certainly would be a bit more insulting if we didn't have the likes of head code discs and etched name and number plates. So yeah, at least we've got one or two sweeteners of the deal there. Okay, come on then, let's stop rambling. Let's have a look. Oh yes, look at that. That is the richest southern green I think I've ever seen. Look at that. Hopefully you can see that. It's a really, really lovely finish on this loco. As always from Bachmann, and the livery looks absolutely spot on first glance. Yeah, it certainly does. Right, let's lift up the loco for the first time then, and wow. Yep, it is pretty heavy, it must be said. Yeah, very, very heavy loco. And yes, as I expected, just like the C1 and the H1, it does seem to have a die-cast running plate, which is pretty essential really, because these locos only have 4 driving wheels, and yet in real life they were tasked with quite heavy trains and such. So the good amount of weight means that the models can probably do a fair job of matching that. And they can. You know, my H1 is a fairly good puller given its size and given its few driving wheels. Anyway, look at this thing. It is fantastic, isn't it? An absolutely gorgeous livery. I think this is actually going to beat the Umber for me. It just looks so clean, so nice and shiny, really, really precise, and such gorgeous colours as well. So yeah, I think this has beaten the Umber for me, but I'll let you have your say over on the community tab. I'll post a list of the various liveries of the Bachmann Atlantics, and you can pick which one you think looks the best, but yeah, I think this is the best I've seen. Okay, so let's have some history of the H2s, and then we'll take a much closer look at this gorgeous loco in all its lovely southern green glory. The H2 class was introduced to the LBSC in 1911, some 6 years after the development of the H1 class, as designed by D.E. Marsh back in 1905. The H2 was to be based around the same design, but with the addition of the Schmidt superheater. Such modifications to the H1 design were overseen by Lawson Billington, as Marsh was sadly away at the time due to illness, so the credit for the design of the H2 actually gets split between them. Like the H1, very few H2s were actually built, only 6 of them in total. I think the H1 had 5, and the class was used to haul heavy Pullman services on various express routes, mainly on the London to Brighton, etc. The handsome design featured 2 outside cylinders, a total loco weight of around 70 tonnes, which produced a pretty healthy tractive effort for the time in the region of 93 kilonewtons. Now, even though far newer southern designs outperformed the H1s and 2s in future years, the H2 still found work on boat trains and other lighter services until the very end of the 1950s, quite surprisingly, the final withdrawal not taking place until as late as 1958. Sadly though, no original examples were preserved and all of the originals have been scrapped. So there she is up close and personal for you, the absolutely beautiful Bachmann H2 Atlantic in the southern green, and absolutely beautiful as this model undoubtedly is. As is quite often the case with Bachmann's locos, the sale price was the right price for this, I feel. This loco was well worth the £120 I paid for it. Unfortunately though, the latest prices for these are completely inappropriate in my opinion, given the level of detail and the quality of these locos. Now quality, I hear you ask. Well yeah, it's not 100% perfect. It's not bad, it's nothing serious, but given these huge prices of late, perfection should be the bare minimum. And as you can see, we've got quite a noticeable join across the top of the boiler, which does break the illusion a little bit, and quite a few of the parts fitted to the boiler have large gaps around them, and the chimney, for instance, even has noticeable glue around it, which is totally unbefitting of a loco as upmarket as this. And in terms of detail, it's seen considerable downgrades from the likes of the C1 Atlantic from Bachmann, which was actually released much earlier than this through locomotion models. So for instance, you've just got a plastic whistle atop the cab, unlike the C1, which had a lovely shiny metal one, which looked so much better. The C1 of course had its opening smoke box door, which had all the detail behind it. Well, on the H2, the smoke box appears to be firmly shut. Now of course that's a silly feature, it's a bit of fun, but it's the sort of wow feature that makes a model worth 200 quid if you ask me. And this model is missing quite a few of those features. In fact, it doesn't even have sprung buffers, as you can see. Yeah, sprung buffers are a largely pointless feature, but they're really cool, and it's actually really impressive to see models that have sprung buffers. Of course, the advantage of not having sprung buffers is that it makes models cheaper, but these are not cheap, so there's no excuse for having cost-cutting features like that. But like I say, on the whole, it is an absolutely gorgeous model. I mean, just stand back and look at it. It's really wonderful. The finish on the boiler, and say what you like about the quality elsewhere, but the finish on the boiler is really, really good. Lovely sheen to it. Very, very metallic looking without looking toy-like. Really beautiful. The weight of the model is also really good. It weighs in at 383 grams, which is actually heavier than the C1 because it's a slightly larger loco, a little bit longer. So the weight is fantastic, and that comes from the die-cast running plate for the most part. That is a really high quality feature. I'm very, very glad it's got that. Let's take a closer look at some of the decoration then. So the lining on the boiler is very, very good indeed. And there's lining all over this loco really. It's very impressive, very impressive. You've got the side of the cab, lovely lining. The underframe is pretty good. It's quite a simple loco in terms of underframe. You haven't got loads of painted pipework like you would on other locos. But what is here is done very, very nicely as per the prototype. So lovely lining. I like the moulding on the suspension springs there over the rear pony. The cylinders are nicely decorated with the lining on them as well. The wheels are nicely painted. They're not lined or anything, but they do have the sort of axles blackened out. They're not the greatest looking axles in the world. As always, Hornby do better axles if you ask me, but at least they are painted and not just left shiny. And of course the front bogie wheels, I'll show you those as well. They're quite nice and realistic looking. Cast metal, of course. Now, even though we had etched name and number plates in the accessories bags, we do have the printed ones on the side of the body, of course, and they look absolutely fine. For most people, that would be perfectly adequate, but it's great to have the choice to add a different one if you want. Let's start at the back and take a look at the cab then. So we have got flush glazing on this cab, which is lovely. We've got metal handrails on the side of the cab and also metal handrails along the side of the boiler, which are nicely fitted. The cab is complete with a movable tender full plate, which is pretty good, so that's a nice mark of realism. And inside, the cab detail is pretty darn good, if you ask me. Plenty of separately fitted parts. You've got the cream paintwork on the back and side walls of the cab. You've got the wood panelling on the floor effect. This even has an opening and closing firebox door. That's an incredible feature. Yeah, it's a very, very good cab. Can't really imagine how that could have been better, so it does get full marks for that. The splashers look fantastic, lots of moulded detail on there. The coupling and connecting rods are lovely. They're obviously made of metal, quite detailed in the places that they need to be, and the finish on those is great as well. It's a real sort of chrome finish which matches the livery somehow really beautifully. I like that. Underneath the boiler there is some depiction of the valve gear between the frames and such. Not a great deal there, and certainly none of it's painted or anything, but there is just enough there to bring out a little bit of realism, which is good. And I have already sort of commented on the smoke box door not opening up. That's not a huge deal, but obviously more importantly is the detailing on there. So you have got the lamp bracket, the separately fitted smoke box dart, and the decoration on there, which is high quality as usual. Towards the front, the running plate is very nicely detailed. You've got lots of riveting on there and some nice textures going on. You've got the classic telltale LBSC spikes, whatever you want to call them, always very long on the LBSC locos, but of course you can put the headco discs onto those if you want. And you've also got the separately fitted lamp irons on the front there as well. And I should show you the front buffer beam, which is nicely painted of course, and there's holes there for you to fit the extra details if you want to. And the loco does come fitted with the NEM coupling front and back. So the loco itself is really, really nice, but it's not particularly complex, and there are one or two really impressive flashy details that could have been included on this loco but weren't. And so this loco is not worth what it costs, unless you can find it for 120 quid, in which case it is worth it. Let's take a look at the tender then, which is similarly nicely decorated. You've got the lovely southern lettering on the side as well as the running number. Lots of lining on this. The underframe detail is nice. You've got the usual moulded axle boxes and suspension springs and such. More cast wheels, which I'll go into more detail later on with. You've got the separately fitted coal load, which is made of metal, so that adds a nice bit of weight to the tender. A few painted tender controls around the front. Nice bit of decoration around the back with the running number there. The brackets on the back of the tender body though are just part of the moulding, they're not separately fitted. So again, we've got one or two concessions when it comes to detail, which are completely inappropriate given how expensive this was. On the buffer beam though, there are some more separately fitted parts. You've got the lamp brackets there which are separately fitted. You've got one of the heat pipes or vacuum pipes or something that's fitted obviously, but no sprung buffers of course. Yeah, the rear buffers are not sprung either. So in conclusion, gorgeous loco, looks absolutely fantastic. I'm very glad I didn't pay more than £120, and I wouldn't recommend you paying more than that either. Obviously, if we vote with our wallets and refuse to buy these locos at the ridiculous prices, then there will be no option but to reduce the prices, as the Model Centre did with this, and I actually got a fairly good deal on it. Obviously, it's not always as simple as that. I mean, Bachmann, for instance, they just seem to produce models in far smaller quantities, and then it doesn't matter if only a few people buy them. But obviously, that isn't the way forward for the hobby. We want lots of models out there, and the sales are obviously really important for people that don't have tons of disposable income, so that they can still get some nice locos. Don't get me wrong, some models do command a high price tag, and justifiably so. Those are fine. But models like this that are sort of adequate, but also very expensive, I just wish they were priced more reasonably so that people can actually enjoy them. I do sometimes find that Bachmann's locos are unnecessarily expensive, which is a shame. But let's take a look at the mechanism. Obviously, again, very expensive loco commands a very impressive mechanism. We'll take a look at that. I'll feed back to you on that in just 1 second. Let's get this beauty down onto the track. So there she is, the beautiful H2 Atlantic, down onto the track, ready for her first ever test. And the mechanism is more or less exactly as I expected it to be. It's nowhere near as bad as some of the Bachmann steam mechanisms I've showed on this channel, but it's also nowhere near as good as other manufacturers' mechanisms, particularly ones of this sort of price tag. So let's jump in and have a look. This loco does have tender pickups, which is a good feature, but they're not the greatest tender pickups. They're the flimsy kind that touch the axles, not that effective in my opinion. And they are only featured on 2/3 of the tender wheels, so it's not the greatest, but it's better than no tender pickups of course. I still don't understand why the plug for the loco and tender electrical connection is behind the first axle. Again, that's something that no other manufacturer seems to have to do besides Bachmann, and it's incredibly inconvenient, and the mess of wires isn't great either. And again, the loco to tender drawbar, not good. It's not secured in any way, which means it's very easy to uncouple the loco and tender, meaning that just the wires are taking all of the weight. It's a horrible design, and everybody says so, and Bachmann still seem to be using it. The base keeper plate is hardwired rather than wired up with spring-loaded contacts, which is yet another cost-saving feature which has not been reflected in the price. That means that to access and service the wheel set is that little bit less convenient. However, we do have proper bearings on the driving axles, which is great, and this is a single wheel drive, so you haven't got the fuss of loads of extra gears and stuff. Now, to remove the body was quite difficult, firstly because one of the body screws was rounded off, literally. I had to use quite a lot of force to unscrew that, so I don't know what's happened there. And also, there isn't very much clearance between the motor and the loco body, so it's actually quite difficult to manoeuvre the body on and off. When I finally managed it though, I found that the chassis was a bit of a mess, to be honest with you. So we have just got a 3-pole motor, unfortunately, another cost-saving feature, but maybe this will run well, we'll have a look. No flywheel, of course, as is quite usual with Bachmann, and the soldering continues to be one of the poorest, in my opinion, of any current manufacturers. I mean, look at this, very, very messy soldering. The legs of this capacitor appear to be soldered together. There's a big blob of solder connecting those, so at the very best, that capacitor is shorted out and useless. At the very worst, that could be actually shorting out the model completely. So if it doesn't work, that's what I'm going to be looking at. I don't know, you've got flimsy tape around the back of the motor, which is just hanging off. Sam's train's run of bad luck continues. Honestly, that one does make me laugh. What the hell has this got to do with bad luck? Maybe it's bad luck for Bachmann that I actually review things properly. That could be it. But yeah, folks, I am not unlucky. I'm just honest and thorough, I suppose. Anyway, the good news is that the gauging is okay. All of the axles were within 0.1 millimeters of the standard, so it's absolutely fine. Back-to-backs, no problem at all. Right, so yeah, kind of mediocre, really. Better than some because it's got the bearings and tender pickups, but still not quite at the level it needs to be for £200. And if you are thinking of buying one of these for 200 quid or 170 or whatever, bear in mind that is a rip-off price, in my opinion. Okay, but does it work? Let's see. Is that capacitor soldering going to actually stop this from running? No, it isn't. Okay, so we are one capacitor down because it's shorted out, but that shouldn't affect the performance, and I'm certainly not going to take a soldering iron to a brand new model before I've finished the review because, yeah, people would slate me for it. So it is working. There you go. Hasn't been running, of course, and I am going to run it in for 30 minutes in each direction before I draw any conclusions from the performance, as always. But to say it hasn't been run in, it is reasonably smooth. It's been doing a little bit of jerking, I've noticed, but I think that will definitely go away. Oh, it is a beauty. It's really, really lovely. I'm a huge fan of Atlantics. They look amazing as they run. Right, I'm going to back it right out of shot. We'll drive past at 50% speed. That's 50%. So I think that's a fairly sensible speed. It's obviously geared for torque rather than speed, which makes sense if you ask me. Okay, and how is the crawl straight out of the box? Let's find out. I'm turning it up very gently. Okay. So it's kind of just jerking forward. That's probably need to give it a bit more. Okay, so yeah, it's cogging quite a lot. It's not that slow and controlled, but that's because it has a 3-pole motor, not a 5-pole motor, and no flywheel, and so that's to be expected. Although maybe it will get better with running in. They sometimes can. Let's go a bit faster. Look at that, still cogging at that speed. Even the cheapest 5-pole motors can beat this on performance. And then a bit faster. I suppose there it's quite smooth now, so the cogging disappears at that sort of speed. So yeah, it's not terrible or anything, but not terrible is not really what you're looking for with a 200 quid loco. I want outstanding in every area, and this is of course far from outstanding. It's modest and average, I would say. Okay, but that's only before running in is completed. Obviously it might get better, so let's find out whether it does. Let's go for 50% speed and run this baby in. Okay, how does it handle curves? Oh. Well, it's a good job it did that actually, because I've got some stray wagons on the track. But that doesn't look good. Right, let's try that again. Alright folks, I've solved it. So remember how I pointed out that mess of black electrical tape on the back of the chassis, and also how I said that there wasn't enough clearance between chassis and body? Well, as I replaced the body, that tape was pulled downwards by the body and it was actually fouling up the rear pony wheels. So I've removed the tape. I couldn't find a way to get the body on with the tape in place. So I've just removed it, doesn't seem to need to be there, and now the rear pony is free to move. Now, for what it's worth, I will just say I don't consider black electrical tape, or electrical tape of any colour, I don't discriminate, to be a reasonable alternative to proper wire management. It's a bit redundant saying it because it should be obvious, but clearly to Bachmann it is not obvious, so I've said it nonetheless. Anyway, let's try again then, shall we? Hopefully it will actually be able to run properly this time. Yes, okay. So very, very slight slowing down around the curves, but certainly nothing too egregious. And it does seem to be running nicely, so fingers crossed, touch some wood, we can go back to enjoying this beautiful loco. And you know, I will say, it runs well. It looks really, really good. If it's anything like my other Atlantics, and it is, then it ought to be a good puller. I'll test that in a little while. And for sure, with some Southern coaches, this thing is going to look absolutely fantastic. So I'll leave it running. It's going to run in for 30 minutes in each direction. When it's done that, I'll come back to you and we'll finish off this review. Okay, we are back. Whoa, speedy. Right. So honestly, quite honestly, over the past hour, I have fallen in love with this locomotive. It just looks so fantastic as it runs along, such a great livery. Yeah, it's great. I absolutely love it. Obviously, my video has got to be representative of all aspects of the model, good and bad, which is why I can't just gush about it the whole time, because then I think my video would give the wrong impression of the loco. But overall, if you're really desperate for one of these, clearly you have to carefully consider what this loco doesn't do quite so well. But if you have done and you still want one, then I could recommend it. Yeah, overall it's a gorgeous looking loco and it runs quite well. I'd be very surprised if the crawl was much better, and I did notice the odd slowdown on some of the curves at the slower speeds, although at 50% it is really nice and smooth and quiet, and it's never derailed or slowed down at 50% speed or come off on the points or anything. Handles curves fine. Yeah, overall it's a fair performer. But what is it like now that it's run in? Let's find out. Is that crawl any better? It just jolted, so I'm guessing not. So I would say it's got a bit more control down at that end now. It's still cogging, as you can see. Hopefully the camera will put that across. Has it stopped now? Let's give it a nudge. There you go. So, slight torque issue there at the slow speed. Again, I've never rated Bachmann's 3-pole motors, so I'm probably going to blame that. Ooh. Yeah, not a lot of torque down at the low end, which is strange because the pulling power generally is really, really good due to its weight. So 0.39 newtons, that's the tractive effort, which is around 24 coaches, which is insane. So it's going to handle these coaches absolutely fine, I should think. It's a set of 5 coaches, quite a motley collection, and it's got the Hornby 6-wheel coaches at the back, and don't forget those have a lot of drag to them. So if it can haul those up Gordon's Hill, then overall I would say the pulling power is more than adequate, and I think it will be able to, because 0.39 newtons, that's quite a bit. Okay, here we go, let's go do it. Okay, we've got matching tension lock couplings, so hopefully this will go without a hitch. Not very smooth though. I'm not actually touching the speed control. Well, I'm touching it, but I'm not turning it. You could see how much it slowed down when it coupled to the train, and you could also see on the approach that it wasn't particularly stable in its speed. But yeah, it's not so bad, I suppose, but it's not going to be getting full marks for performance, that's for sure. Okay, let's do it then. Let's try it with 50. There you go. Ah, it looks lovely with coaches though, that's for sure. So I finally have enough Atlantics to run one on each of my 3 lines, so I'm doing exactly that today. So on my middle line, I've got today's odd engine out, because it's not Southern or LBSC regioned. It is the C1 Atlantic, which I thought, for a similar price, was a much more detailed loco. It looks a lot better, it's got better features. The mechanism is largely the same, but this one does perform better than the H2 somehow. Could just be due to manufacturing tolerances. Maybe it's got a better motor. I don't think it does though. Yeah, it's a better loco overall, I would say. You could see that start off was a bit better. So that's the C1, that's the GNR one. And then on the inside line, you've got the H1 Atlantic, which came just before the H2. I guess that makes sense, given that it's 1 and not 2. And this is more similar in terms of a model to the H2. Yeah, a little bit simpler on the detail, exactly the same mechanism, similarly slightly overpriced. And this has got its the pre-grouping LBSC coaches. So I think that looks pretty good. There goes the C1. Oh, thundering down Gordon's Hill there. Just waiting, here it is, here's the H2. So let's see if it slows down at all with these coaches. Yeah, very, very slightly, but its lack of torque is less noticeable at this sort of speed, that's for sure. And it is doing it, look, it is managing. Crikey, doesn't it look lovely? So what have you got here? You've got a beautiful looking loco with a fairly average set of features, which is being sold for a very, very premium price. Overall though, you do get what you pay for in terms of the loco's looks. I think it has a really stunning profile as it runs down the track. Yeah, it's got a real presence to it, and it certainly looks very elegant indeed with coaches. So you do get what you pay for in that sense. Under closer inspection, the level of detail isn't quite there, and then under the hood, it's certainly a lot less impressive when you start looking at the mechanism, but that is fairly standard for Bachmann, I suppose, and their new releases suggest that they are trying to improve on that, because they have had better mechanisms, but that doesn't really apply here because the mechanism really isn't that great. But yeah, overall it's okay, it's a fine model, and for 120 quid like I paid, it's a great model. It's a very good purchase. Let's have some ratings then on the beautiful Bachmann H2 in the Southern Green. And imperfect as this model certainly is, it sure is beautiful. I mean, there's definitely no denying that. Level of detail then, I've given 4 stars. Overall, great level of detail. The finish is excellent as usual from Bachmann, very, very good. The decoration is high quality and very precise for the most part, which is great. Cab detail, really impressive. Quite a few separately fitted parts, but then it doesn't have any really impressive details, such as the sprung buffers, the metal whistle, which I think would have looked better, or perhaps the opening smoke box door as the C1 had. So we have seen more detailed locos out there, but overall the level of detail is great. The performance then, again, it's not the greatest really. The crawl and the slight slowdowns around second radius curves do let this down. It's not the greatest crawl, it does a fair bit of cogging, and that is not a surprise to me because obviously it has a 3-pole motor with no flywheel. However, at the higher speeds it is very nice and smooth, fairly quiet, nice constant runner actually at 50% speed and above. So overall, yeah, the performance is pretty good, better than average I would say. The pulling power is great due to its massive weight of 383 grams. It has a tractive effort in the region of 0.39 newtons. So I'm laughing because it's ridiculous how much that is for such a small loco. Yeah, that's around 24 coaches, which is more than a Hornby 8F. It's more than a Hornby Royal Scot. I suppose that's more of a comment on how naff those Hornby engines are, but still the fact that this beats them is impressive. The mechanism then, I have had to knock this down quite a bit unfortunately to 2.5 stars. Now it's not all bad where the mechanism's concerned, and like I say, there are elements of this that are better than a lot of Bachmann mechanisms. For instance, the tender pickups and the proper bearings, I like those. But then there's also a lot not to like. You've got the 3-pole motor, you've got the poor loco to tender coupling design, both with the drawbar and the electrical plug. You've got the shoddy soldering inside, no flywheel, dodgy assembly with the legs of those capacitors soldered together. Yeah, it's not the greatest really, not that accessible. Serviceability, bit of a faff because of you know, the clearance between the body and the chassis. Yeah, it's not terrible, but I've definitely seen better, and for the price it really needed to have been better. Even at 120 quid, what I paid, should have been a bit better. The quality though, I've given 4 star. Overall, it is good quality. It's assembled to a high standard. Like I say, it looks great. The quality of the finish is wonderful. A 5-pole motor, a hidden seam line, no glue visible, and the better fit of components would have definitely made this a 5-star quality model, but overall it's not too bad, fairly good quality. Value for money then is a bit of a tricky one because the RRP for this is £199.95. You tend to pay around £175 for this normally, which I think is very poor value indeed, really, about 2 stars. But then I paid £119.98 from the model centre, so that's much better. So I think that would be 5-star really. So I've done a split between the two and given it 3.5. But it is a generous split at that, because the 120 quid price tag is not that common for these. And for the most part, if you're buying new, it's going to cost you a lot more. So even that I think is generous. But overall that is 7.47 out of 10. Yeah, it's a good model. Overall, definitely not as good as the C1 Atlantic from Bachmann. It's more like the H1 really, with its slightly reduced set of features, except this is much more expensive now than the H1 used to be, and so I've had to mark it accordingly. So yep, 7.47 out of 10. Let's pop that into the logbook. There it is, 20th place above the Hornby A4 and below the GT3. Overall, it's a good looking model, very nice, runs pretty well too. If you can get one for the right price, it's a fine model, I can recommend it. If you can't, it's probably one to steer clear of really, because you don't really get what you pay for in a number of areas. Well folks, it's just about time to wrap this review up. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, comment down below and let me know what you think about the H2. Have you tried one for yourself? Have you got one? Do you think I was right? Do you think I was wrong? Of course, this is all just my opinion, so if you disagree or if you've got a different point of view, that's absolutely fine, and I do encourage you to share that with me. But I've said my piece now, so I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. You have a fantastic week, and I will see you very soon with another video of some sort. All right, cheers then folks. You take care. Up today, I'm going to be looking at a beautiful Hornby stick. No, it's not a Hornby. How long was that? 2 seconds into the video, and I've already ruined it. Right, it's Bachmann.